having completed the extension of the church here at St. Anthony's, on the windows, or some of the windows in the meeting room, in the foyer, we have this design, this image of the vine and the branches, simply to remind us when we walk past that beautiful image in today's gospel where Jesus says, "You are the branches and I'm the vine." You've got to remain in me, he says. And when you remain in me, you will bear much fruit. And that's what the Father wants. So we are people who time and time forget. And so these images in the church remind us, simply when we walk past, that Jesus is the vine and we are the branches, and we need to be close to him in order to bear much fruit. And today we celebrate the memorial of Saint Teresa of Avila, a woman who was known as a womanly woman, who was beautiful, talented, outgoing, adaptable, affectionate, courageous, enthusiastic. She's described totally as human, a womanly woman. And this womanly woman realized from very early on in her life that she was the branch that needed to be with this vine, Jesus Christ, in order to bear fruit in her life. And she did bear much fruit, but there was many difficulties she had to endure in life. Teresa's heart belonged to God. She was an energetic reformer who was misunderstood, misjudged, and opposed in her efforts to carry out the good she was doing. She struggled much with opposition, and in the midst of all of this, she clung to God in life and in prayer. There's two instances I want to share with you in St. Teresa of Avila's life. She was this energetic reformer which took a lot of opposition from the people already there to know any change in the order. And so one day she was having this big meeting with this other convent, sister convent. She prayed a lot long before she went, prayed on the journey, and she had to travel on horseback to get there. And so Teresa gets down the horse, goes in, and after all this long discussion, nothing happens, and she is pretty upset. She's prayed all this while, prepared for this meeting, and it didn't go as she wanted it to go. She gets up on the horse and she starts to ride off, and the horse rears up and drops her down, and she falls off the horse. And she gets up, she dusts off her habit, and she looks up to heaven and she says, "If you treat your friends like this, no wonder you have so few." And she gets up on the horse and keeps going again. And she continues to do the work. But she was able to talk to our Lord like that because she had such an awesome relationship with him. She had many struggles in her life. So often we think the saints had no struggles. In fact, they had so much more struggles than you and I have. And they went through all this suffering in their lives, simply because these holy men and women, every time there was a struggle, there was temptation, they turned to God. And that's the difference, how they became saints and we are still sinners. Because temptation itself is not sin. You can be tempted a lot, but every time you succumb to this temptation, it becomes sin. But rather, these holy men and women, every time they were tempted with whatever it was, they turned to God. They turned to the source of life, and they prayed for that grace to overcome that temptation, to be strong in that moment of temptation. So you see, when temptation comes, we don't have to succumb to it all the time. Precisely when temptation comes, we stand up to this temptation strong in faith, believing that God will give us the grace, has already given us the grace, and continues to give us the grace to stand firm in faith in this moment of temptation. So you see, naturally, when people are desiring to live a holy life, you're going to have a lot of temptation and struggle. Like Teresa of Avila, she got thrown off the horse. But she dusted herself off, told God off, and she got on the horse and she went back to to a convent. Because this woman had a wonderful relationship with God, and the secret was a good prayer life. That is how men and women like her were able to stand firm in their faith when temptation arose, when suffering came to them, because they were strong in faith. They knew that they were the branch that needs to be so entwined with the vine in order to have this life and live it to the full. Teresa of Avila said, the second thing she said, lots of things she said, but the second one I want to say is that she said, prayer is the door through which God's grace enters the soul. Prayer is the door through which God's grace enters the soul. If this door is shut, how do you expect God's grace to come? So you see, if we are to stand up strong in faith, firm in faith in times of temptation and overcome this temptation, we have to pray better. We have to always have that door opened so the soul receives the grace from heaven to remain with the vine, so that we can bear much fruit at all times in our life. So on this memorial of St. Teresa of Avila, let us be mindful that God calls us, He gives us the grace to be strong in the face of temptation, so that we can always, through prayer, deepen our relationship with Him. And every time a temptation arises, a reason for it, a suffering, we face it head on in faith, knowing that God gives us the grace to be strong in faith and to grow and to bear much fruit in our life. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.